Hello everyone, welcome to episode 14 of the Listening Room Sonic Journeys. I'm your host, your groove guru, and your guide to the vibes. I am the cultural DJ, and first things first, I want to apologize for the lack of an episode last week. I mentioned on the Cultural DJ Facebook page that I had the research notes and everything, but I wasn't able to really compile them in a way that would be satisfactory for an episode yet. That episode is meant to be the next episode for next week, but this week we're going to be talking about the joy of the deep cut. If you're new, be sure to like and subscribe. Be sure to check out the socials, the Facebook, the Instagram, and the TikTok. All the links for those will be found in the description. New episodes out every Thursday as much as possible. Sometimes they're, not obviously, but as much as possible, new episodes out every Thursday. And yeah, let's get right into it. Most music fans have experienced this moment. Someone asks what you're listening to, and instead of naming a major artist, you mention a record that sold a few thousand copies, maybe it came out on a tiny label, or maybe hasn't been in print for decades. So why do some of us spend so much time searching for obscure music? What is it about the deep cut that gets us digging? Well, first of all, let's talk about what a cut is. Now, a cut is really kind of just synonymous with a record or a song or a track. Some people might say instead of, I really like this song on this album, I really like this track, they might say, I really like this cut. Like, this cut was really good. So really, cut is just another word for a song or a track. So, yeah, but what is a deep cut? Well, a deep cut can have several different meanings. It can be album tracks that never became singles or big hits or anything like that. They could be whole forgotten artists. They could be limited regional scenes, or they could be records that were overshadowed when they first came out. But in this case, for the sake of this episode, we're really kind of talking about tracks that never became singles or big hits or things like that. So there's a bunch of different qualifying definitions for a deep cut, but for this specific case, we're talking about the songs. So let's talk about how exactly I got hooked to the idea of the deep cut, of kind of more obscure music. And it really kind of starts with this film, one of my favorite films of all time, actually. It's called High Fidelity, and it's a really great film for people who are music nerds, really deep music nerds. Funny enough, because before I even saw the film itself, I was really kind of watching scenes of the film on YouTube, and that's really what made me want to watch it in the first place. And as it turns out, it's not really about music or records as much as the scenes make it out to be. It's really more of a story about a guy who's kind of going through his breakups, and he's kind of ranking them by the ones that hurt the most. He's obsessed, him and his friends, they work at a record store. There's a guy named Rob, he's the main character. There's a guy named Barry and a guy named Dick, and they all work at this record store. And Rob is going through his top 5, most heart-wrenching breakups. And it's intercut with parts of them being at the record store itself. And there's a really cool scene with Saturday at the record store, where it's really busy and they're putting people on to new music and everything. But the point is that this film really kind of got me interested and invested in more obscure, alternative, independent music. There's a really, really cool scene during that Saturday at the record store where the character Dick, he's talking to this girl that he would end up with by the end of the film. And they're talking about Green Day and Green Day's influences, and they're talking about how The Clash was one of their influences, right? But then Dick pulls out this record by a punk band called Stiff Little Fingers, and the girl loves it. She thinks it's fantastic. And it's stuff like that. That's kind of really the heart of this conversation, is that it's finding something that's not maybe as popular or maybe not as well known, but it's still just as good, even better sometimes, as something that's really popular or a big hit. It's really kind of the thrill of discovery, that special feeling of finding a really great record that didn't get a whole lot of shine, that didn't get a whole lot of attention. And like many others, I've come to find that a lot of times the hits aren't always the best song on the album. There's tons of albums where it might be loaded with really, really great hit singles or just singles in general, songs that the artist or maybe the label wanted to push more so than other tracks on the album. But a lot of times, some of the deeper cuts, the cuts that are in between the hits, tend to be even better than a lot of the popular hit songs, the hit singles. And I think that is really what makes deep cuts so very special, is just finding something, because a lot of times you might be into an artist and you may only know the hit singles. I think what makes deep cuts especially interesting is the idea that sometimes an artist's entire discography could more or less be considered a deep cut. You know, you have artists that are huge, that are major mainstream attractions, but then you have artists that may only be attractions to a niche, smaller audience. And of course, you might have hits amongst that smaller audience, but in the face of a more mainstream audience, pretty much anything that they put out could more or less be considered a deep cut in a way. But that doesn't make them any less amazing. I mean, there's artists that put out albums and songs that blow a lot of the more popular tunes just completely out of the water. And that happens year after year after year. And a lot of people tend to gravitate towards a lot of those more alternative or indie or lesser known artists. And unfortunately, they can risk the danger of becoming a bit of a music snob. So obscure music doesn't always mean better music. There are some people that have convinced themselves that the only good music is obscure music, like deep cuts, essentially, that pretty much poo-poo on anything popular that comes out. They believe essentially that popular music as a whole is just awful. Like there's no heads or tails about it. It's all bad, and pretty much anything, really it's anything they listen to is good, but anything that is popular is bad, and anything that is underground or not as well known is better by default. But I'm here to say that popular music can be great. There's tons of artists that are lesser known that I love, and tons of artists that are very popular that I love. And I really don't have a preference on either, personally. I think it's all fantastic. I think both kind of draw influence from each other, which I think is even more interesting, is because you have artists that aren't as well known but still will draw a great deal of inspiration from the bigger league artists. And likewise, you have a lot of bigger league artists that will draw influence from people that aren't as well known, and even will put them on sometimes so they can get more shine, which a lot of times I feel is very much deserved. They're putting a lot of hard work into their craft, so it's really cool when a bigger artist puts a smaller artist on and allows them to kind of bask in that shine and that major exposure. But when it comes to music snobbery or being an elitist, the goal is not to impress people with knowledge. It shouldn't be. When it comes to music and learning more about music and having a broader musical knowledge, I don't believe that the goal should be to impress people with that knowledge. It should be to impart that knowledge to other people in a way that doesn't come off as snobbish or like, how do you not know this artist? And it's funny because recently I was seeing people. It was Steely Dan, and Steely Dan's not like a obscure band or anything like that. They're not underground by any means, or by any stretch of the imagination. But it was on TikTok. I was seeing people talking about Steely Dan, and some people were saying that they don't like when people know the same band as them, and they were referring, of course, to Steely Dan. But it's interesting because I feel like that kind of takes away from the community that can be built around that band or around the enjoyment of that band or artist. I mean, you would think that if you found people that enjoy the same kind of music or the same artist or whatever, as you do, you'd want to share that joy and that love of that artist or that band or that style of music or whatever. But there are some people that have just put it on themselves that other people shouldn't be allowed to enjoy what they enjoy, or because they don't know about them or know about them as much as they do, then they essentially don't deserve to be a fan. Somebody could just be learning about an artist, right? And they don't know everything. They only know the bigger songs. And to me, that's perfectly fine. I mean, if you intend on diving into an artist, sometimes the best way to do it is to get into some of their more popular, more accessible songs. The Beatles are my favorite band. If I was getting somebody into the Beatles, the first song I wouldn't play for them, it wouldn't be like Rocky Raccoon or something like that. It wouldn't be Why Don't We Do It in the Road? It'd be something more popular. It'd be something that's way more accessible, something that we'll want them to explore their music on their own. If I can give them a list of songs, like, here's some of their better songs or some of the more popular songs, it'd be something that will hopefully encourage them to want to explore more in their own time. But the point is that there really is no good in being a gatekeeper. I feel that people should be allowed to enjoy whatever music they want to enjoy. I kind of got off track with this. This is about deep cuts, but I'm trying to make a point of how deep cuts and people that really kind of get into deeper cuts or more obscure music tend to fall into the trap of becoming an elitist, right? But I'm here to say that there's really no good in being a gatekeeper. There's no good in being somebody that just, because how are you going to be the gatekeeper of a whole genre, of somebody else, a whole artist, a whole band? How are you going to gatekeep them, right? Yeah, people should be able to enjoy whatever they want to enjoy. That's perfectly fine, whether it's something popular or something obscure, a deep cut, a major single, whatever. But that brings us to why it is that deep cuts matter in the first place. And deep cuts, they matter because they not only preserve overlooked stories in music, but they also tell a bigger picture beyond just the hits. Because the hit singles will tell really kind of only half of an album's story. Especially when you have artists that are way more album driven, that they really go out of their way to tell a story, like a cohesive story or narrative through their albums. Listening to the hit singles really only tells you part of that story. There's a lot of cuts in between that go further in depth on what it is the artist wants to say with their craft. And that's why I feel like the deeper cuts, the songs that aren't the singles, the songs that don't become the big hits, are really equally as important, sometimes even more important than the big hits, because they tell a more full story. That's why I often recommend to listen to an album in full. And me personally, I'm an albums guy. Like, everything I said about kind of getting the whole narrative of an album, that's me. I would prefer to hear the album from top to bottom so I can understand where it is the artist is coming from, what story, what narrative, what idea are they trying to convey, because there's so many different elements and so many different perspectives coming from each track. Each track is like something different, but it all is meant to tell one story from top to bottom, front to back, beginning to end, right? To close, I think that exploring deep cuts allows us to see a world of music beyond just the bigger singles and the bigger hits. And it makes listening to music as a whole way more fun and interesting. I think being able to find something that maybe only so many people have ever heard of, it's really something special. And it lets you kind of feel like you're a part of something that's more personal than just something that, millions upon millions of people have heard tons and tons of times. It's something that allows you to feel like, it allows you to get a broader sense of the music that's out there, because, thousands upon thousands upon thousands of songs are released every single day, and You have tons of big radio hits that get millions of streams or whatever, but so many more songs that don't get as much exposure come out. And honestly, they could be just as good or even better a lot of times than those big hits. Like I said earlier, sometimes the deeper cuts are even better than the big hits, but they don't get as much shine. And a lot of folks, myself included, feel like they deserve to, but that's not always the case. And even though that's not the case, that doesn't take away from how great they are. The fact that they are deep cuts at all really kind of adds an element of intrigue. And I encourage everyone listening to go and try to find something they haven't heard, something they're not familiar with. Maybe there's an artist that they already love, but maybe there's some songs from albums or just songs in general that they've put out that you haven't heard or haven't gotten around to listening to. I encourage you to go out and check them out. Maybe they'll be better than the songs you're used to. And with all that being said, I will leave you all off with that. Thank you all again so much for listening. I really appreciate it. The next episode, the one I've been working on, will be the one, I promise. I've been kind of not putting it off, but I've been trying to get all my notes and everything together. So the next episode will be the one that I've been working on for about 2 weeks now. But yeah, new episodes out every Thursday. Be sure to check out the socials, the Cultural DJ Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. The links for those will be found in the description. And yeah, thank you all again so much for listening, and I will see you all next time. This is the Cultural DJ signing off.